pain is always an invitation for transformation. And that was so interesting for me because I think we live in a world where pain, anger, being uncomfortable is almost not socially acceptable. And so to look at pain almost as an invitation rather than something you need to be up against or fighting with, I think is a really interesting way to look at it. And it's something that I've really just started to take on board is, maybe this is an opportunity to change and to grow. And I think everybody in one way, shape or form can attest to the fact that they have been able to become a better human being. And upon reflection, I really do believe that I've stayed solid in my values, in my ethics, in what I believe to be true and important to me as an individual. My roles over the different seasons have changed. And I think there's an easier way to let go of those roles when they're no longer your role to fulfill if you haven't carried them as closely as your identity and as your identity that that's who I am. I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a CEO, I'm all of those things because God forbid, those things are not your role anymore. Then where do you land? What are you left with? I feel like I'm leading in a space where I really feel called to at the moment. I feel more confident and at peace with who I am as a person and what I believe to be true and right and stand for. And I think peace just as a concept is something that is so undervalued these days. I think we're all getting very used to living in complete chaos, and actually to confidently say I'm living in peace is almost unheard of these days. And so for me, I think just really living as a peaceful, simple life is beautiful.
Welcome to the CEO Lens, the podcast where we explore leadership beyond titles, beyond balance sheets, and into the human experience behind it all. Today's conversation is about something we don't speak enough about in leadership. What happens when the identity that once defined you no longer holds? It's about falling personally, publicly, and finding a way not just to recover, but to move forward with intention. It's also about leadership through vulnerability, purpose beyond position, and what it really means to rebuild yourself in a public space. My guest today is Rachel Kolisi, social impact leader, philanthropist, author, and someone who's had the courage to tell her story in her own voice. Before we really get into the conversation, I want to go back to the young Rachel and in the very early years before your public life, before you had this platform. Who was she and what was she looking for?
I think thinking about little Rachel, young Rachel, kind of brings me back to maybe an age around 7, 8, 9. And I was a very insecure little girl. I'm 4 girls and a boy, so one of 5. And grew up in a very small town, Makanda, formerly known as Grahamstown in the Eastern Cape. And I think I just remember never fully understanding who I was, what I stood for. I could just be swayed any which way and just desperate to fit in and desperate to find a place. So I think just a insecure, lost little girl.
Yeah. And it sounds like there was this whole concept around survival versus making choices in those early years.
Definitely. I think, growing up in a big family, anyone who's grown up in a big family can appreciate that it is almost a level of survival of the fittest, and there's only just enough for what's there. There's not often anything extra. And so, I think just a desire to be accepted and a desire to fit somewhere. That was always important for me.
And that sense of belonging, did it ever take hold at any point?
I wouldn't say in my younger years, but definitely kind of heading more into my teenage years. I've spoken a lot publicly about how I struggled with mental health. We've just touched on the fact that, young kids, it really is just something that's so prevalent in so many young people today, which is why I think it's an important conversation to be had for so many. But I really struggled with my mental health as a teenager, and it wasn't a conversation in society, in homes, in classrooms yet. And so I really I bore the brunt of the fact that it wasn't a conversation at all. So I think it's great that has really started becoming a part of our language and a part of kind of how we converse today. But as a teenager, something I really struggled with.
And were there certain events or
I think,
strong memories from that time that really defined that struggle?
Yeah. Something that I think really triggered my depression was my parents' divorce. I was 15 years old, and just as siblings and children really were quite in the middle of things, and that was really, really hard. And I think that really is what triggered a lot of my mental health realities and brought a lot to the forefront for me. And I just didn't know what to do with that, didn't know who to speak to, didn't know where to go to, didn't know how to get information, access, advice. And just kind of sat with that.
Which was common at that time. I think a lot of the idea of resilience being push through it and have courage was often the solution provided, right? We were never allowed to pause and ask questions or challenge.
Yeah. No, and I don't know that conversation is even further, very far away from where we are today. I think that idea of push through, you can do it, you can survive it, you can make it. I think there's an element of that's important to know. Resilience is on offer for all of us, 100%. And I think that there's moments to accept this is really hard and this is something that I'm struggling with. And if it's something a little more serious, then to get advice, to get resources, to get some kind of support. But I think it's not too far a conversation from where we are today.
So your definition of resilience probably has changed with time. How do you define it now?
I don't know that I've got a single sentence that I could define it as. What I would say in my journey of resilience back then, it was to push through everything and anything to arrive somewhere, where now I would say it's okay to not necessarily push through something in the way that you thought you would be able to or should. And so for me now, resilience is honestly just being very accepting of where you are and still choosing to take steps in the right direction. Even if it means you don't know what the outcome is, even if it means you don't know what even your next step looks like, or if you can take the next step, or if it's safe to take the next step. I think the fact that you do does mean that you're resilient.
So it's probably accepting the idea that going through some tough times isn't about preserving yourself, but allowing yourself to evolve and change and maybe come out the other side a different person.
Absolutely. And I went to a conference a couple of months ago, and someone highlighted this point. She said, pain is always an invitation for transformation. And that was so interesting for me because I think we live in a world where pain, anger, being uncomfortable is almost not socially acceptable. And so to look at pain almost as an invitation rather than something you need to be up against or you're fighting with, I think is a really interesting way to look at it. And it's something that I've really just started to take on board is, maybe this is an opportunity to change and to grow. And I think everybody in one way, shape, or form can attest to the fact that they have been able to become a better human being. They have been able to use some of their most important growth in their life from things that were exceptionally challenging. You don't grow from a place of comfort. You grow from a place that's really challenging and hard.
And I think your story is a strong one because it's all too easy to sort of typecast as being a woman who's gone through a divorce, and a very public one.
Yep.
But in actual fact, your story is much broader than that. It's about dealing with change.
Yep.
And building skill sets. And I think you're very quick to call out that you're not perfect and you don't have the perfect solution. But your story is a powerful one in that you've lived it.
Yeah. And I have a platform. And there are so many women specifically that have reached out over the last, I would say, 18 months to 2 years that have just said, like, how do we do this? How do we get through this? This thing is really hard. And it's not always specific to a divorce. Sometimes it's retirement. Sometimes it's a big move, a job change. Sometimes it's a death in the family. Like, there's so many different versions of hard. And I think there's just so many people who are wanting to see that in somebody else, and how do you kind of move through that? So I'm very conscious of the fact that I have a platform and I want to use it in a way that it's going to benefit others. Yes, it's been a very hard journey. Yes, it's been very hard. And I think there's a responsibility that comes with having a platform. And that's been really important for me in this process, to be able to bring conversations that I think that are important for all of us to be having around mental health, around financial security for women, and a number of other things. But it's not around one season of my life that, yes, of course, has been very public and has shaped a lot of who I am today. It's about many different seasons in my life that has shaped who I am today, and highlighting some of the other parts of my story as well. And it's acceptable to some and not acceptable to others, and I completely understand and respect that too.
Talking about seasons, okay. You went through a season where, for want of a better word, you had this borrowed identity. And if anyone saw you, they saw a very successful person with a profile.
Yeah.
But maybe inside you were feeling something different. What was that journey like, and how did you come to terms with it?
Yeah, I've been reflecting a lot on identity and thoughts around identity. What does identity mean to me as an individual? And I think I've actually always been solid in who I am, which is my identity. What's changed, especially more recently, is my roles and the roles that I've carried, the hats that I've worn. And, you know, that could be in a workspace, it could be in a family space, it could be, you know, in so many different forms. But I think having a degree of separation between your identity being completely tied to the role that you fulfill and who you are as a person, I think are two completely different things. And we sometimes make the mistake of intertwining those two things. And upon reflection, I really do believe that I've stayed solid in my values, in my ethics, in what I believe to be true and important to me as an individual. My roles over the different seasons have changed. And I think there's an easier way to let go of those roles when they're no longer your role to fulfill, if you haven't carried them as closely as your identity, and as your identity, that's who I am. I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a CEO, I'm all of those things, because God forbid, you know, those things are not your role anymore, then where do you land? What are you left with?
So how did you transition then from those almost defined public identities to getting your own voice and to allow yourself to come through and transcend those classic roles?
I think I had already started some of that process when I was still fulfilling a lot of those roles, really being focused on sharing my thoughts, my voice, my process, and stopped looking at myself as an add-on to somebody else, but as an individual, that I have something to offer, that I have something to bring to the table, almost just putting a little bit more value on myself. And I think often as humans, we underestimate the value that we bring. And we expect, if we're not carrying executive roles, if we're not, massively followed on social media, if we're not ticking certain boxes in our mind that would constitute success, we've got less to offer than somebody else. And I think that's so unfortunate for people to feel that way, because I think every single individual has been uniquely created and given an opportunity to lead in the environments that they find themselves in. And I just think it's unfortunate that people feel that some are more important than others, because I think now more than ever, if we look at the global situation and what's happening around us, we're desperate for leaders to be leading in the spaces where people find themselves. We don't constantly need to be looking for the next biggest role or best thing. Just lead where you're planted.
So if someone's trapped in that identity that you described, what would be your message to them? Because staying there's a price to pay, right?
There is a price to pay, absolutely. My message would be to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think it's very easy to get comfortable in being miserable as well. It doesn't always mean comfort, doesn't always mean that you're happy there. Sometimes you actually start getting really happy with the fact that you're in a space that's not great and not healthy at all. And so what very practical realities do you need to be looking at that need to change in order to get out of that headspace? Where is it that you want to be? And what are the very practical steps that you can be taking between those two spaces?
And the hardest part of that journey for you, what was that?
The hardest part of this journey, I think, of moving from one space to the other, off the top of my head, would probably say it was the fact that I was in a space that I actually didn't belong. And that was hard to accept, because I spent years dreaming, investing, working in this space that I was building and growing, and then having to realize, actually, this is not the space where I belong and where I'm meant to be. And that realization on its own is just massive. And then it's like the steps to take to move from there and to start to rebuild.
So who are you now? Because that's the important question, right? You've been on this journey of unshackling yourself, releasing yourself from those roles, allowing your voice to come through. You spoke about the importance of resilience, and resilience is a journey through toughness that changes you. So who's Rachel now?
Who's Rachel now? Rachel is so many things. Even when I arrived here today, I was so excited to be here and have this conversation. But the reality is, like, I'm wearing a million different hats in different roles that I'm now carrying. But it's, I think at my core, who I am is, I feel like I'm leading in a space where I really feel called to at the moment. I feel more confident and at peace with who I am as a person and what I believe to be true and right and stand for. And I think peace just as a concept is something that is so undervalued these days. I think we're all getting very used to living in complete chaos. And actually to confidently say I'm living in peace is almost unheard of these days. And so for me, I think just really living as a peaceful, simple life is beautiful. And then on more of the, on the professional side of things, just rebuilding something that, sometimes I actually did this post this week and I said, sometimes it feels like you're rebuilding with shaky hands and you're just like, oh, I'm not sure about so many things. I don't know what I'm doing. Is this right? Is it good? Is it going to be, are people going to buy into this? And it's so scary and it's so beautiful, because I think some of the most incredible, beautiful things are built from that space. And I think just really taking from my experience and pouring everything into, this new organization that I'm building that is just servicing so many people is incredible. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing if you're able to take some of the hardest challenges that you've experienced and make something with that. It's very cool.
So your journey is inspirational. And in South Africa, we have a very high level of depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And the stigma associated with depression and anxiety is still there. And I think what you're calling people to do is to break the silence. You spoke about as a young woman, a young girl, you didn't know that it was not okay to be in that space.
Yep.
And I think for many South Africans, we carry on, right? We just keep silent and we carry on. But I mean, your message is inspiring to say you need to break the silence. You need to say it's not okay to be like this.
And what's been interesting in this process of raising some of these topics that absolutely are still taboo are conversations that people feel should not necessarily be a conversation at the table. What's been very interesting is when I have spoken about it and clips have been brought out and put, and you just see how people are responding to it. It is very sad and astonishing that people would still have the audacity to say, stop talking about it, shut up. We don't want to hear it from you anymore. This is not a conversation. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Move on. Those are literally comments that I receive almost on a daily basis. And for someone who's in a space that is really struggling mentally and actually really wondering if their life is valued on this earth, to go and look at those kinds of comments when someone is choosing to use their platform to bring this conversation forward. And that's kind of sometimes how it's received, and people feel the need to drop their comments on. I genuinely believe that people don't understand how dangerous those comments can sometimes be. And for somebody who really is struggling and somebody who may be looking for some kind of resource or, some kind of conversation around it, and then to go drop into the comments to see that kind of stuff, of course you're not going to feel brave enough to reach out. Of course you're not going to go and seek help.
That's
and
true.
so I think we as a society really have leaps and bounds to go to keep bringing the conversation forward and to annoy the people that get upset about it.
There's a block button on social media.
No, I've made good use of the block button.
Let's talk a little bit around how have you built your strength and how have you coped? It's like you're starting to open up a little bit around the public component. You chose to stay in the public space. You chose to be vulnerable. And you chose to be very open on the journey you're going through.
Yep.
And that comes with criticism.
Oh, yes.
So that's clear. But what I'm more interested in is how has Rachel built that ability to sustain the criticism, to overcome the changes that you've gone through? What are those sort of hacks that you've developed for yourself?
I think what's been really important for me in this process of you almost sign up to the backlash that comes with living in a public profile and with a public life. You almost have to have an agreement with yourself that that's a part of it. It's not all sunshine and roses. It's not all support and happy and hearts and all the nice things. And I remember, because I actually joined social media quite late. It was only after my son was born in 2014. At the time, that was considered late. And I remember thinking to myself, if I'm going to open my profile up publicly, then I have to have an agreement with myself to stay true to my values and who I am as a person, my identity. And I can honestly say that throughout the years, ups, downs, excitement, devastation, I have stayed true to myself. And I don't think people can fully appreciate how challenging that is in an environment where people can constantly throw their suggestions, their ideas, their thoughts at you, and you receive them, blocked or not. And for me, it's been one of the most empowering decisions I made for myself, and it brought a lot of clarity. And I think clarity is also just such an important topic in this whole conversation as well, because it can be so messy and messages can get so mixed. But I really feel that, just staying true to what I believe. And I never wanted to create a platform where women specifically wanted to be me. They wanted to live my life. They wanted to experience what I experienced. I wanted women to be able to relate to parts of my story, and sure, to the moments that have been beautiful to share and to the moments that have been really challenging. But I never wanted to create something that is just all sunshine and roses constantly, but something that is true, something that is honest, and something that is real.
Relatable.
Exactly. And not in a way that I'm trying to be authentic, that I am, that is who I am. And I do believe that I can confidently say that I have. And proudly so. And sure, there's a lot of backlash for it because, of course, people only want to see you living your best life online, and that's what we constantly are getting fed and offered. But that is not what I'm about, and that is not a message that I want to send.
What does health mean for you and wellness?
Health and wellness, I think in a word, consistency. I think every single time I shared a lot about after I had my second birth, I put on so much weight, and I remember that as a whole public thing as well, just receiving ample amounts of backlash for what I looked like and, how I was living, what I was eating, how I was exercising. And I went on a very intentional health journey then. And what I realized is you just have to keep showing up. You have to just keep at it, keep going, keep doing your best. And I think consistency as a concept is also just something so underrated. I think people underestimate the very small decisions that you make on a daily basis and how that actually all adds up after a certain amount of time. And so, consistency is just a value in the way that I live that's been really important.
You've written a book.
Yes.
Falling Forward.
Yes.
Why the title?
The title was actually a bit of a surprise. I was sitting in a strat session just thinking about what was I going to build, what was I going to do next. Because apart from, my job was a part of what was left behind in the previous season. So it was a complete rebuild for me. And so just thinking about, what I wanted to do, what was next. And my brother actually popped up and he's like, just falling forward, just something about that. And the more that I thought about it and reflected on it, I thought it's that whole concept of, I don't know what's next. I don't know how this is going to look. I don't know if this is going to be accepted, but I'm going to do it anyway. And something that I think everyone can relate to, we all fall. We all fall. We all have to find our way back to our feet again and to step in the right direction, to keep going again. And so very practically, it's become a big joke in my family about like anyone that could possibly fall anywhere. We just fall forward the whole time. But it's the concept of falling and just getting back up again and moving, even when you don't know or you're unsure.
So we're all going to go through this.
Yeah.
We're not immune to it. And you started by saying, listen, it could be retirement, it could be becoming a parent, it could be transitioning from varsity to workspace. And I suppose the question then is, when you're doing that, do you put a focus on yourself? Do you put a focus on your life? Where did you start putting your attention as you fell forward? Where was I had two priorities, myself and my kids. I felt very strongly that you can always offer the best version of yourself in a workspace or as a parent or as a friend if you are investing in yourself. And I think often we are constantly making sure everyone else around us is taken care of and all good, and we are last on the list. And so that was my first priority in my fall forward process. And then second was my kids, just creating stability. That obviously had been massive amounts of change for all of us, but creating stability, creating structure, really being present and showing up. I think
was really important in that season as well. And so, yeah, it's when I've gone back to other parts of my life where, you know, I've fallen and I've had to get up and go again, it always came back to reflecting internally rather than figuring out all the things I need to change around me, all the different, you know, different routines I need to get into and who is around me. Just do some introspective work, and that has been an incredible process.
I suppose that locus of control, right? Control what you can control and allow what you can't control to be what it is.
Yes.
And that power of actually taking charge over yourself.
Yes.
Is quite critical.
It is, and I think most leaders can attest to the fact that there is a level of control that we all want to have in our lives. And it's not an easy thing to let go of and to just, well, it is what it is, which has become one of my favorite sayings over the last 2 years. But that idea of there's this area that I can really control, work in, I can influence the outcomes. And then there's areas that actually you've got no control over, and you kind of just have to let the pennies fall where they may. And it's a very hard process, but to reflect on what we touched on earlier, that's part of growth, is learning to let go.
Your critical focus has always been on purpose. I mean, right from the early days, the Kolisi Foundation, and even today, before we started talking, you started to talk about your next journey in terms of your area of focus of health. Maybe talk a little bit around that purpose and why it's there and why it's so important to you. And what are you hearing out there in the street that people need to focus on and put attention to?
Oof. That would be a long list. But when it comes to purpose, I remember for years, you know, even at a school level and as a young girl, listening to motivational speakers and going to conferences and all these different places and people talking about purpose. And when you find your purpose and you find a way to make money from your purpose, then you will thrive in life. And I was always like, what is my purpose? What am I here to do? What am I supposed to do? And I put so much pressure on myself to try to find my purpose. And similarly, just got to get the bills paid. So I just worked to get the bills paid because that was what was important, you know, fast forwarding to after school now. And I think there's something that has always been in me since a young girl, just the inequality that still exists in South Africa and how that never sat well with me. It was just never something I could look away from, never something that I could ignore. And so from a young age, I always tried to volunteer wherever I could, get involved wherever I could with nonprofit organizations that were doing, you know, whatever work it was. I wanted to get involved. And then we had this incredible opportunity with the foundation that I was previously involved in to create this beautiful vehicle that has impacted and done so much for so many South Africans' lives. And I remain incredibly honored that I got to be a part of that. And that role changed. And it's philanthropy and servicing in South Africa and building in South Africa is always going to be a priority for me. And I realized in my previous work role that is where my purpose lies, is in giving back. And so kind of working on this, building this next part of what I was doing, you know, I've built this amazing organization, Falling Forward, and we've got thousands of people that are it's almost become a movement, this massive community of people that has now come together. And I just thought, what a shame it would be if we couldn't activate all those people in serving in South Africa as well. And naturally, that really brought about then creating a new vehicle, which is the Falling Forward Foundation. And yes, before this, I just came from a big strategy of kind of just planning what that looks like. And I've partnered with an organization called the Impilo Project, who are doing phenomenal work in healthcare in South Africa. And for the last year, I've been a part of their healthcare days, but they're servicing over 500 people with premium healthcare from, optometry, dentistry, gynecology, general GP, whatever it is you could imagine in the healthcare. They are creating these healthcare days that I've been so privileged to be a part of. And so, yes, continuing on in healthcare, which is interesting because I've got no background in healthcare at all, but realizing there's so many different elements to healthcare, and it's not just a one size fits all. There are so many different branches and parts of it. And just to tell, a short story, we recently, and I did a post about this on social media, but through, our work with the healthcare, we worked very closely with the school, and one of the teachers called and said there was a little girl at school that kept falling asleep, and could one of the doctors come and check her? Came to check her, and she basically explained that she's experiencing sexual violence at home on a daily basis. And if you remove this program and this work, that little girl never would have had the outcome that she's now, had. But the reality is that is across the board for so many South Africans. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive a little bit more into the advocacy side of healthcare in South Africa, but really address it hands-on and at a grassroots level as well.
Which is a good segue, right, into the other area that you very focused on is women, independence, dignity, having a voice. That's also a critical area of your own focus. And I think your own journey has informed that.
It certainly has. And again, coming back to some of the things that I've shared and spoken about publicly and just how they've been received. And of course, for the most part, it's really supportive and people are, they're encouraging and it's amazing. And then there's the flip side of the coin where it is really dehumanizing and negative and hard to absorb. Thank goodness I don't take that stuff on personally. But for a woman sitting at home, really questioning her worth, her value, and whether or not she should come forward about whatever it is. It could be a situation at work, could be a situation at home. It could be an array of situations, but feeling that her voice is not valued, her voice is not something that will be counted or heard, I think is so problematic on its own. And so there's parts of what I'm saying that I think a lot of people can relate to and really tie elements of their stories to mine and feel it's being represented in some way, shape, or form. And it's not to say that that's across the board at all, but I think it's important for the woman who feels like she's really on her last straw to feel represented in some way, I think is really important. And along with that, I'm not just talking about it, I'm creating spaces for it as well. And so, this documentary roadshow that I've just come off, there was just short of 5,000 people. It wasn't just women, but of course, majority women, but 5,000 people that came to these roadshows. And they were really just such an expression of what it is to come together as a community and really just support one another. And it's been so beautiful, and I'm absolutely going to carry on in that space. But I think the reality is there are too many women who are scraping through in life and then expected to lead in certain sectors and spaces while scraping through. And it's just, it's crazy.
So for this community of 5,000 women, what do you hope for them? What is it that you would ultimately, because you're challenging status quo.
Yes.
You want to see something different. What does that look like for them?
I want to see more women in leadership positions across sectors. And what that looks like is not necessarily just in a corporate environment or in a working space, but being able to lead confidently and comfortably in your home, if that's the decision and the choice that you've made for yourself. And I just think that generally there's just not enough support across the board for women. And I think women are also, I'm just going to be careful how I frame this, but I think it's really important for women to be informed around certain systems and the way things work in the world. And it's been very interesting to me in this process, and also just receiving tons of people's stories and reading a bunch of information and data and, statistics. It's been really interesting to see how many women are actually not informed, just very practically, on the financial state in their household. They actually just have no idea what's going on financially. And I think that's really important for women to just have a baseline of, if I want to save and I want to pay off my house at X, what does that look like? And some of those concepts are not even taught at a school level. And so if you don't actually go and look for the information, it's not actually really offered on hand. So I think there's a bunch of different spaces that I want to go into and dive deeper in. Financial independence is one, mental health, of course, is one, physical health will be another, but a bunch of different areas that I really want to dive into.
Many of our households are women-led.
Yes.
Right? Single moms.
Yep.
So all those things you're describing are very empowering.
Yep.
And it's not just about a male-female relationship. It could be any partnership.
Yep.
But I think a lot of women are alone, taking care of their own household.
And the reality is that most women are now working women as well. And there is still quite a significant pay gap between men and women in South Africa. Some of the statistics that I picked up was between 23 and 35% of women are getting paid less than their counterparts in the same positions. At an exec level, there's 30% fewer. There's 30% women that are at exec levels in South Africa, and 7 to 10% of those are CEOs of JSE listed companies. And that is the reality just in South Africa. On a global level, of course, that's even bigger. But I just think for women to have the opportunity and the choice, women deserve to have the choice to really be able to invest in their careers, to grow their careers, to grow businesses. But because we are often the option in the household to kind of take care of the kids and take care of the household, we're always the ones expected to give up our opportunities and jobs in order for that to function well. And it's, there was always this concept of balance. And then I heard Michelle Obama talk about it, and she said, it isn't balance. There's always going to be something that's got to give. So it's either going to be your career or it's going to be your family, and, and there's a price to pay constantly. And I mean, I personally have just experienced that this morning. There's always going to be a price to pay in whatever it is that you're doing. And I just think that the fact that that expectation always sits with the woman is problematic. And
the sacrifices it creates.
Yeah, it creates massive sacrifices. And I think women deserve the opportunity and option to be able to be successful in both.
If someone's listening now, and maybe it's a woman who's falling forward, right? What should they hold on to? What should they be using as their anchor as they go through this change and they find their voice?
If there is a woman listening now and she's kind of questioning so much about herself because of the season that she finds herself in, whether or not that season has landed her there because of a decision she made or somebody else made, my advice would be to find, and this is very practical advice, but to find things in your best season that you can take into the storm with you. So I think to understand that actually an important part of growth is going through something hard, not to try jump over it, jump around it, to jump under it, but to actually allow yourself to just go through the storm is one thing. But try to find things that were consistent when life felt easier and lighter and manageable. So for me, very practically, what that looked like was working out. 1 hour a day, every day, I would have a time that I would just work out, or Therapy, of course, big advocate for therapy. Find a community that you connect with once a week, or a friend that you check in once a week, but find little consistent rhythms that you can take with you in the storm, because it helps things, especially if you're going through a massive change, if there's been a death in your family. But if there's been a massive change and you're now having to find this new way of living and doing life, I think it's really important just to find things that feel stable and still feel solid and still feel the same. And that was very helpful for me in a lot of different parts of my journey, is just find solid ground.
And anchor on the consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Rachel, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for your courage, for your honesty, and also for being an example for so many of us. And also just teaching us that we don't need to shy away from the challenges, but they could be transformative and it could help us define a new version of ourselves. And long may you continue to be successful. And I hope that your foundation finds its legs, particularly in the health sector, where we share a common agenda. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.